This program is brought to you by the HStvZim She Leads project with support from Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria.
Everyone, thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Rebound Series. My name is Mthuli. This effort comes to you only on Heart and Soul digital platforms. Today we're discussing the issue of women, peace and security, implementation of UN Resolution 1325. Today's program is brought to you by the HStvZim She Leads project with support from the Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria. Now, just to give you again a bit more background to this program, the UN Women Peace and Security Annual Report for 2019-2020 notes that women leadership is more urgently needed now than ever before due to conflicts and humanitarian crises, which are becoming more complex, violent, and protracted. And that is, when you combine the effects of COVID-19, makes it a very difficult and precarious situation. Despite that, women largely remain excluded from processes to achieve peace and justice. And so today's program will be focusing on that report and also zeroing in terms of the situation here in Zimbabwe. I'm joined to discuss this by a panel that includes Justina Mukoko, who is the director for Zimbabwe Peace Project, alongside Kudachi Tsike, expert in women, peace and security, and Lloyd Charai, who's a researcher from Research and Advocacy Unit. Without taking up much more time, let's get straight into this discussion. I'll begin with you, Justina, and I'll ask you, Zimbabwe, because we are part of the UN family, is obviously signatory and signs up to this resolution that was passed 21 years ago. Where, at a global level, are nations in terms of implementing that resolution? And when we look at specifically at Zimbabwe, what is the state of affairs in our own country?
Thank you very much, Farai, and good evening, listeners. I think when we look at the global level, there's been some progress. Some countries have come up with national action plans, although we would probably want to see more happening. And when we come to zero in on Zimbabwe, I think there is still a lot that needs to happen in terms of women, peace and security. Because the resolution 1325 is affirmed through 4 pillars, where there is the issue of the participation of women, the protection of women, the prevention of conflict, violent conflict and war that could affect women, as well as recovery. My discussion today will basically focus on women's participation, where we seem to be having a lot of deficits. I'm thinking about the global pandemic, COVID-19. And we are recognizing that decisions are being taken in institutions where the participation of women is limited. And yet women are actually significantly impacted by the pandemic. You take the cabinet where decisions are taken. For example, now we have the no jab, no job. Cabinet only has about 6 women out of 20 cabinet ministers. And it means that decisions are basically coming down on women, and they are not really part of the decisions that are being taken. So I think that's where the concern is, because women can really not fully participate and ensure that there is peace in terms of the way that they are able to live if they are not involved where the actual decisions are being taken.
Thank you so much for that, Justina. I just want to bring in our other participants into this discussion. That point that you've just made, where you've mentioned peace, and a lot of the time I hear Zimbabweans in general saying, oh, we are a very peaceful nation, we are lucky that we are peaceful and things like that. So as I bring in Kudachi, I would like you to tell us, I mean, in our own local context, what are some of, we've obviously heard about COVID-19, but what are some of the other conflict situations do we have that affect women, especially where many people seem to suggest we are peaceful and we are at peace?
Thank you, Farai. Yeah, that phrase for me is very problematic. We are at peace, but there is a lot going on. When we talk about what happens to women in public spaces, we talk about what happens to women in political spaces. You can't say that we are at peace. For me, what is really important for us to acknowledge here is there is so much that is happening in women's lives that is definitely cannot be put down as that Zimbabwe is at peace. We are at peace, but we are not at war, which is what people normally equate. They're sort of comparing the two. Are you at war or are you at peace? We are not at war, as in, there isn't outright guns blazing between two forces. That is not there. But the situation of women in Zimbabwe is definitely not peaceful. We've had issues around sexual violence in particular, particularly during elections and other political processes. That for me means there is a deeper problem within our society, that even though we are at peace in inverted commas, it's not peace.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. Lloyd, I'd like you to bring you in here as well, just to, I suppose, share that. What are, we've just been told issues of violence, particularly around elections, and I think we'll talk about that in greater detail later. But in terms of your own findings and insights, just how much more, vulnerable or exposed are women compared to their male counterparts in this environment that is clearly not at peace, but not very peaceful?
Well, thank you for that. Let me just say that the issue of women, we must look at the issue of women in a political context. And if you want to see the real impact, how women are impacted, just try to understand the politics of elections in Zimbabwe. So I think by and large, we normally give significance to women when we are talking about elections. That's where these issues pop up, issues of women participation and so forth, because women are a constituency that is very large and that can actually deliver an election vote. So I think you want to look at the issue of women in that context. They are an instrument for sustenance of power. So the issue of political violence or violence against women or gender-based violence, so just try to look at those issues in that context. Women become very, very important. Like, for instance, now we are approaching elections in 2023. We now seem to hear more about women participation, women empowerment, women getting loans, and so forth. it is realizing the importance of women as a constituent that can possibly secure a vote for political party X, Y, Z. So I think look at it from that point of view. So the violence that you see about women, just look at it from that point of view. That's where you get the importance and the kind of the violations that you notice, which are trends. Which are trends as we approach the electoral cycle. So I think for now I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for that. I just want to come back to Justina. You obviously mentioned that some countries have started to implement action plans around this resolution. In Zimbabwe, have we made any progress towards that? Are we doing anything? And whose responsibility is it to start coming up with those action plans?
I think it's a collective effort, because even the women themselves need to be inputting into the national action plan. But having a national action plan does not also mean that it is going to be implemented. So having it is one thing, and also having it being implemented is another.
I want to ask you, I mean, obviously government has a role to play in this, civic society has a role to play in this. Is anyone agitating for this to actually be done, for that action plan to actually start being implemented?
Oh yeah, I think there is a lot of work that civil society is involved in to ensure that the action plan is not just a document, but it's also followed through with implementation. But what I also wanted to add from what you had asked about this country being peaceful, I want to look at the situation that women find themselves in. I think the wars that they are facing, it might not be a war where they are guns, but they are wars that are related to poverty, which results in women being exploited and manipulated when elections approach, where at times they are used as a tool of violence. We have also seen a lot of inequality as women try to make ends meet. And you are also aware that women are also struggling even to get just clean and potable water, and be able to provide things like health for their families before we even go to the public sphere, where they are having to juggle their way through in terms of reclaiming their space for them to be able to participate in politics.
Very good points there, and I like the fact that you've spoken about the other wars that are being spoken that at a poverty level, at a community level, at things like that. Now, I want to again bring in Kuda here to answer some of the issues that are being raised here, where things like gender-based violence, things like rape, ordinarily the victims, those who've been violated, should be able to turn to security enforcers, to security agencies, to give them that protection. I want to bring in the role where, are we seeing enough women in these roles to be able to play that protective role and to deal with communities? Because it has been noted that women are less likely to use excessive force, are more likely to create consensus within the communities that they work. So at that level, are there enough women who are in the security forces to be able to foster better relations, but also be able to cater and provide protection for their own counterparts who are being violated?
Thanks, Marai. No, to answer your question in a very short and blunt way, no, there aren't enough women. A lot of the women who have attempted to report have gone there and been told by male police officers, a few here and there, female police officers, to come and bring the person who raped you or who hurt you. How do you tell someone who's approached a police station looking for assistance, and you tell them, go and bring the perpetrator to the police station? It means that particular person who's receiving the report doesn't understand the issues around trauma, the issue, just the pain of knowing that this is what has happened to me, and then to come forward. That coming forward in itself is a really big thing for a lot of women. You hear people saying, oh, yes, there's rape, but it's not, the statistics are not that great. The statistics are not great because of the responses that the women get when they try and report. And it's such a violating crime that in yourself you start to question whether, should I really go and report this? Will people believe me? And what does it mean now that my story is known in a particular community? I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was interviewing women who were sexually violated. And one woman said, when I went to the police station and reported, I was told to go and sit in the garden. And then when they were ready for her, they said, oh, that woman who is reporting rape, can you come inside now? The officer in charge is here. You can't do that. It's such a private and completely traumatizing crime that to just treat it as any other crime, it's not right. So definitely we need more, not just more women, but more conscious security people to take up these cases.
That point you've just made, and I also want to bring in the rest of the panel, but I'll begin with you, Kuda, where that access to justice. And so these women have been told, bring your rapist, and obviously they can't do that. They have to go back into that community and live with that very person who has violated them. Surely, is there any recourse going forward? Will there be mechanisms to make sure that at some point in the future, when we've perhaps strengthened the institutions and address these challenges, justice can be served, can be brought to people who are in that predicament?
The good thing is that rape prescribes after, it's a crime that prescribes after 20 years. So even if you were raped in 2010, you can still go and report your case today and say, this is what happened. And you should still be able to get justice. There will be questions. People will ask, oh, why didn't you come earlier? Why is it that you're only coming now? But there are reasons behind why women, the ones that I mentioned already, why women don't report rape. So there is room to report those cases. But a lot of the times people then say, oh, but it's already been 10 years. Why should I bother now? The evidence has been destroyed. But and also just the knowledge of the law that prescription is 20 years. So I think this is the message that I would like to give out to women out there, is that if you were sexually assaulted 10 years ago, you can still go and report. The police have a duty to investigate your case.
For that, and I hope it will definitely help women who are in that situation. As you come in here, Lloyd, earlier you spoke about politics, elections, and many people say that Zimbabwe is always in election mode. We are heading towards an election 2023, but in the past we have seen cases of violence. Again, similar to what we've just been talking about there with Kuda around rape. Often violence around elections is always associated with, don't you know that's what happens around election time? And those are my elections, and those things get swept under the carpet because people just assume, perhaps if you go and report, you'll get even more. There'll be retribution. They'll come after you even more, those people who may have done that to you. Are we ever going to get a situation where women can face the people who tormented them in that way, who beat them up, for instance, who abused them? during election time because they live in that same community. They are being forced to coexist with them.
Yeah, I think this is the challenge that we have. So in the past, issues of, perpetrators of violence have gone scot-free. So it is always going to be very difficult for women to get that particular justice. And so the mere fact that the perpetrators also continue to live in the same areas with their victims, it remains traumatizing. But what I want to add is that I think the violence against women, just like Kule was saying, I think the mere fact that you have people who run around and threatening, just mere threatening that we can rape you, we can do all sorts of things. It's just it's cohesion by itself. So I think we'll never have that particular justice for women. That is one factor. Violence is just one factor that contributes to women not participating in politics. Just the mere fact that there is potential of violence in politics. So you often you hear the term politics is dirty. That's why you find women not wanting to participate in politics because of the violent nature. I think by and large our politics has not matured. We still exist in a society where we believe we can coerce people to convince them by use of threats of violence or actual violence. So I think we need to move away from that particular aspect. So for as long as there is politics or elections associated with violence, you find that very few women want to contest in any positions, whether it be at council level, local government level, or at assembly level. So those are some of the contributing factors that why you see perhaps women not wanting to get associated with politics, or just the mere idea, or just the mere fact that you want to consider yourself as a candidate for a political party. So we need to deal with the violence, and the violence, unfortunately, we have sort of like you said, you've sort of accepted that politics are associated with violence, but that is not the case. We need a framework that deals with people who push for violence in elections, whether they be they political parties or candidates. I think the law is there. I think the law is there, or a framework needs to be agreed that whoever pushes for violence in politics needs to be dealt with decisively, because we have people who just go scot-free. I mean, there are plenty of cases of people in politics who have been associated with victimizing women, spearheading violent campaigns and so forth, and getting away with it. So that needs to be dealt with at election level. So that we can cultivate a culture of women wanting to also contest in elections.
Very good point, Lloyd. There, as you say, the law is there. Perhaps not deterrent, because perhaps what we have here is a culture problem where people actually don't realize that they are committing a crime, because elections is about teaching people physically. So perhaps it's what role is there, apart from enforcing laws, is there for education and awareness. So actually letting people know who might be ignorant, who actually believe that it is normal to beat people and to victimize women during elections. It is normal to see a woman who you think is inappropriately dressed and to tear up her clothing. Who think it is normal that a girl who has not done well in school, I should just marry her regardless of her age. To what extent should we be teaching and creating awareness as opposed to just throwing the book at them?
I think that is actually what needs to be happening. We need to have a lot of awareness raising in terms of what the rights prescribe and how citizens can actually enjoy those rights. But I also wanted to speak to another issue, an issue that Lloyd has brought up, that we do have laws. Yes, we do have laws, and we have institutions that are supposed to be enforcing those laws. I am specifically looking at the police in this instance. And I think the biggest challenge that we have when we come to women is the fact that they do not have confidence and trust in the institution. You will speak to a woman and say, your rights have been violated as you have experienced violence at election time. But you will find that it is very difficult for those women to be able to go and report what they would have gone through, for fear that the institution of the police will not be able to protect them when they go back to the community. We had a project in the run-up to the 2018 elections where we were basically looking at violence against women at elections. I remember one case of a woman in Mashonaland West. I spoke to that woman, referred her to the police. Initially, she did go to the police. And when she was now being told that she needed to go and stand in court and also testify and all that, she just lost confidence that she will not be able to live in that community. I said to her, but it's the police where you have gone to report. And beyond that, she could not be convinced. So there is a lot of capacity building that needs to happen to those critical institutions to ensure that they are able to discharge their mandate according to the Constitution. And I think for the police, they need to really transform from a force to a service. And I think we will have more women and girls being able to approach them for assistance.
I just want to mention, Justina, interesting you should mention that I came across a very recent case, unfortunate case, September 2021, where a woman was allegedly tortured and killed because she had been accused of hiding some money that she had stolen from her sister. And I think Zimbabwe Peace Project is then, was then involved and brought this to light. And you also then say, as you quite rightly say now, the police are also leading some of these human rights abuses. To that level, what is to be done? I asked earlier a question to Kudad where I was saying, would it change if there were more women who are in the police service? Would they treat their counterparts better? Or would there be same victimization and ill treatment? Because we also hear that stories of women treating other women badly.
That's a common statement that that comes up, Farai. But I'm thinking that if the approach is better in terms of training those police officers when they take up their role, the results will actually be very different. I think what is also important is that as stakeholders, we need to be coming together and ensure that we are working on a training manual that responds to all these issues. I have no doubt that if we have more women in higher positions in the police service that has actually accepted that it needs to work to serve citizens, we will actually see a difference.
Thank you so much. I want to talk here about, because part of what that UN report points out, that UN Women report points out, is also that it must guarantee that the resolution guarantees that there should be adequate funding for programs that ensure that women have access to peace, that they have access to security. Now, to you, Kuda, I would like to ask, who should be providing this funding and what should it go towards? What are we funding? When we're saying we are providing access, what exactly should we be doing here?
Part of what is important, Farai, is creating a system that is victim-centered, not looking at the perpetrator, which is really what our justice system is all about. We need to be victim-centered. So let's focus on looking at the experiences of the victim rather than blaming the victim, which is what we do a lot of the time. So that training that Justina was talking about is important, but it must be victim-centered. This is what we need to focus on. The fund needs to be able to, we do have a victim-friendly system here in Zimbabwe, but a lot of the times it's focusing on children, not on adult women. So it's important to have that system fully funded, making sure that everything in that system works. If the woman wants to be in camera, the cameras are working, the interpreters have been trained. They need to be training for, I think what we really need is feminist theory. And this doesn't necessarily have to be women. So you can have men who are feminists. That for me is one of the things that's really important. Making sure that as I said, the systems are all working in the police, the courts, social welfare, shelters, wherever these women are being housed during the process, that if they are deciding to leave their homes or communities into different places because they cannot stay there. Those are all things that need funding. And yes, we may say donors should be supporting this, but us as Zimbabweans, we need to start that philanthropic culture of supporting our own systems, because it is us that it's our people that are suffering. So we need to be able to have that giving culture. And where the donors are coming in, government must also come in, but ordinary people must also be coming in. We're not necessarily asking for a huge amount of money. We know that our economic situation at the moment is not great, and a lot of people cannot spare a lot of money for that. But whatever it is that you can, to contribute to making sure that these systems are there to protect women. Everyone has a woman in their lives, one way or the other.
I like that your focus is on systems and structures and institutions. I think that is where the challenge is, where it's all the funds can come, you can have the well-resourced, but if the systems don't actually work, this justice will never be brought about. Lloyd, I want to ask you this. Obviously, on this panel, and I'm sure in many spheres in Zimbabwe, people know what needs to be done. We're talking about it here. We are discussing it. There are great ideas towards it. Why have we failed to make enough progress? Where is the stumbling block?
I think it's a very simple one. The stumbling block has been lack of political will. There's no political will to implementing Resolution 1325. That is as short as I can give you. Let me give you some bit of context why I would say that there's no political will, and for as long as we are in this state, I think we will talk about empowering women, about gender equality, increasing women representation for many years to come. The starting point, I think the women's movement did a very fantastic job and lobbying for an institutional framework that allows for that provides for equality and that acknowledges that women and men are equal, and as such, in all decision-making positions, it's acknowledged, and this is through the Constitution. But the Constitution has been adopted in 2013. To date, we're still talking about women participation, equal participation of women. So I would have thought that, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I would have thought that it is very simple. Implement the provisions of the Constitution where you'd say the issue of gender equality is taken into account. through constitutional provision. I think the framework is there, but there's lack of will. There is creation of institutions that promote women participation. For example, in the Constitution, the Chapter 12 institutions, the Gender Commission, the Human Rights Commission, and so forth. But my question would then be, to what extent have these institutions promoted the participation of women in Zimbabwe? By and large, the implementation has been very slow. To a large extent, it's about cosmetic conversations that are taking place. And I think what the conversation that needs to take place is one between civil society and government. I know government does not like the participation of civil society in these issues. I raised earlier that the issue of women participation is political. So I would think that, for starters, we need to acknowledge that government and civil society need to work together to promote women participation, or to implement Resolution 35. Because currently there are two processes that are taking place, where civil society is going in one direction and government is going in another direction. So we need a policy framework that merges the two approaches. Government also needs to acknowledge that civil society is very key. In us realizing Resolution 35, and I think the starting point also is to translate the technical aspects to also the marginalized women in rural areas. Yes, we've talked about women in positions, and government would celebrate that. Yes, we have put women in senior positions. For example, the Minister of Defense is a woman, and so forth. But these women have not done much to promote the wider participation of the younger generation. So there's a generational gap. There's a generational gap which needs to be closed, which has resulted in what I would probably say, what I would probably describe as resulting in the death of the women's movement, because that connection between Beijing and the conversation that is taking place now, there's no connection. So I think we need to revisit that and have conversations between both civil society and government. I think also we would want to take the elitist approach to the marginalized rural areas, like I said earlier, where we need to start educating women in rural areas that they can still participate fully in taking up positions. But we also need to address the culture of violence in our society, address the patriarchal issues that we always talk about, the matriarchy that we always talk about, because we might have leaders, we might have women who are in positions, but they also think like men or behave like men. And this is the kind of women that we have in our society, women behaving like men. So the gap is not addressed. So I think also, finally, I would say perhaps what we also need to look at is how we then merge these approaches together to address issues of genuine issues of women participation in our society. So the idea of chasing the dollar, the idea of chasing the dollar has also been problematic. We are approaching elections, and this is where we start talking about women representation. Is in between the years we talk about very important issues, child abuse, child marriages, HIV/AIDS, and not fully about inclusion of women in key decision-making positions. We need these conversations, not to start talking about women participation around elections. It becomes an election issue, which is not the case. This is a serious issue, and I think then the government needs to take it seriously by implementing seriously or adopting seriously provisions of the Constitution which promote women participation by and large.
Thank you for that, Lloyd. I just want to come back to, and this is a question to both Kuda and Justina, whoever will take it first, or both of you can come in. Lloyd has just spoken about the lack of political will. And I'm saying to myself, as he quite rightly said, we've got a woman who's a chairperson of the ruling party. In the period between 2000 and now, we had a woman who was a vice president. We've had very vocal and influential first ladies. Why aren't they championing these causes? Why do we still see lack of political will when we have people who, some of these influential people, when they want things done on the political front, things can be done overnight. Resolutions can be passed overnight. Suspensions and expulsions happen overnight. Why aren't those women in those positions having that same kind of influence where they can push these issues to be addressed swiftly?
I think part of the issue is it's not just having the women there. It's them being able to convince the holders of power that these issues are important. For me, that's where the issue is. Yes, I may be influential, but I'm one person. I am one person and I'm fighting a system. That's where the issue is. So yes, it's important to have those women there. The more they are, the better. But for now, the ones that are there, we applaud them for the work that they're doing, but it's the power behind the power that needs to be influenced. So that for me is where the whole issue is.
The power behind the power. Justina, would you like to weigh in at all?
I would really subscribe to what Kuda has just said. I think women need not be taken as the cherry on top, but they should actually be part of the ingredients of making up the cake. And I'm also thinking that for them to be able to produce results, they need support structures. And in this instance, I'm also thinking that we also need to be speaking to the political parties in terms of the quota system that we also recognize they have not respected. It's important that that begins at the local level. And when they are building their self-structures, the participation of women should start from there so that they are fully involved in everything that is happening around them. Because I think when we get to elections, what we have seen is that you will find that men and women are actually enemies. You will find that probably a constituency has been set aside for a woman or something like that. And then you will find the men saying, well, you've got those 66. You might as well make room for us in this particular constituency. And it causes a lot of tension, which is also a source of the political violence that manifests itself.
I want to come in as we head towards wrapping up. There's an important point Lloyd mentioned where he seems to suggest there is a gap between older and younger women. And here I want to see if there's any role at all to be played through social media to A, help report, document, and bring to the forefront some of these violations, some of these, the lack of security and peace for women. So it can be a very good vehicle in terms of that. And A, what are we doing to harness it? But also B, to capture, to bring younger women into this discussion, to make them more aware and perhaps to empower them. Is this a viable way to do it? And if so, how can that be done?
Indeed, it is a viable way of approaching this because the young women are the future. We are on our way out and they are an asset when we look at the future, and they need to actually be included in all these conversations, not just in the conversations, but I think we need to see young women taking up public office. But as long as we have got political violence, like what Lloyd has said, we are going to drive a lot of these women away from claiming that space that is going to ensure that they become the future.
Kuda, 21 years since the passing of Resolution 1325, we are bemoaning the fact that we haven't made much progress so far. Going forward, will it be another discussion we'll be having 20 years from now where we still haven't come up with an action plan? We still haven't made progress, and Zimbabwe and the world is still saying there's this RTE resolution we passed and we haven't achieved.
I sincerely hope not, but there needs to be a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that that doesn't happen. So just to also tag on to what Justina was saying, for those of us that have been in the movement the last 20 years, we need to start having intergenerational conversations with young women to take up the torch. We also need to make sure that we are mentoring, and in fact, it doesn't even have to be, it's one-sided mentoring. We can have peer mentoring with the young women so that they have, I think there's a sense that, oh, we are teaching the young women about the movement and what has been going on. They know. So what we need, there needs to be that sharing of information between the two groups, because the young women have information that the rest of us don't. We have information, we have the history that these young women don't necessarily have. So that peer mentoring and intergenerational discussion is really important for us to be able to move us from where we are now to make sure that this action plan is actually done, implemented, so that by the time we are at 20 years from now, we can say, oh, look, we have, we put our action plan together, we've implemented it, and look at the number of women that are in the police force, senior women that are in the police force, senior women that are in the security. And if there are to be any peace discussions, peace processes, there are women there because we are bringing something different to the table. That is for me what is important.
And I think just to add to that, you're saying not just women and senior women in these forces and in these positions, but senior women whose voices can be heard.
Yes, feminist women is what we need. Feminist women is what are needed in these spaces.
Very lastly to you, Lloyd, you have the final word in this discussion. Going forward, you've obviously mentioned the political will and the need for that to happen. What are the other key priorities, do you think, if any, in terms of making sure that we actually start to implement what we signed up to?
I think for me, I think what we need to do is we need to change our culture. So I think if we start from there, we need to change our culture and have a culture of inclusiveness, and realize that women are not just symbolic. Their participation or representation is not just symbolic, but it has to be substantive. That must translate. The policy must be translated into substantive matters, and see women actually taking positions that are very key that determine how society goes. And we need to transform our institutions to be democratic, to represent to uphold the rights of citizens, of women, and change that particular culture. So I think it starts from the mindset, and from the mindset, then we start implementing what we have set up to do. The action plans are there, so we need to just to put that into action, and I'm sure by that we can realize some bit of progress towards implementing Resolution 1325.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to you, Lloyd Charai from Research and Advocacy Unit. Thank you, Kudachi Tike, expert in women, peace and security. And thank you so much, Justina Mkoko, Director of the Zimbabwe Peace Project.
Thank you, Farah.
Thank you.
Indeed, that does it and wraps up this edition of the Rebound series, which was brought to you by the HStvZim. She leads a project with support from the Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria, focused on UN Resolution 1325, 21 years later. How have we fared in terms of implementing that? Clearly, the message is perhaps not enough, a lack of political will. More action needs to be done, more work needs to be done, building the systems, ensuring that They create an environment for women to thrive, to participate in political leadership, community leadership, and that they feel safe enough and have confidence in those institutions. Some of the key highlights and takeaways from this discussion. I hope you certainly enjoyed it. My name is Farai Makutuya. I'll be back again to do this next time. Be sure to join me on the Rebound series. And remember, it's only on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Bye-bye for now.
This program was brought to you by the HStvZim She Leads project with support from Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria.